Earlier this month, the terrorist group known as Hamas attacked Israel by going in to the country during a massive festival that was being had and basically just laid siege to many, many civilians. It was a very horrific event, and everybody at this point has had something to say about it. So I figured it's time I do too. Hey everyone, my name's Christian Verstappen, and I have a lot to say about many things. I want to talk about the Israel and Palestine conflict. The first thing I want to open with here is that there is a lot of narrative spinning on this issue from, I want to say both sides, but I'm not sure if that's the right. Well, yeah, both sides of supporters. And one thing I want to talk about right off the bat here is this thumbnail disgusts me. Because what we see here is we see a Palestinian laying waste to what I can only imagine is Israel, and we see a scared little, a little Israeli child and presumably their father, with, of course, the Israel flag, where the Palestine flag is being held by the Palestinian person. Now, one thing that I want to make perfectly clear right off the bat: what the Israeli people have been doing to the Palestinians for years, decades, is horrific. They are quite literally in an open air prison, essentially a concentration camp. They are being ethnically cleansed. They are being treated absolutely horrifically. And they deserve rights. They deserve autonomy. They deserve to be free and to live among the land. And they should not be treated like this at all. They deserve to be free. But I want to be very clear about this as we continue here, that you can be, and I believe should be, able to support Palestine and the liberation of Palestine without supporting the terrorist organization of Hamas. And they are a terrorist organization. They have it explicitly stated that their goal is to wipe out the Jews. So you have two sides here of the opposing nations where there are extreme people that want to wipe the other out, and it's insane. But this framing here is disgusting. There is a very hard stance that many people in the West who are allied with Israel have taken of, oh, we need to be pro Israel, all this stuff. And there are people who are, of course, essentializing all Islamic people, all people that could be Arabic, kind of like what happened in America after 9/11, though not nearly as bad. This kind of thing does happen, and it was wrong when Russia began invading Ukraine as well, by the way, where people were attacking Russian people, taking it out on them because like American people who happen to be like of Russian descent. These kind of things do happen, and it's absolutely disgusting. It's essentializing, and it's sins of the father bullshit that I absolutely do not stand for. But we've also seen a spike in hate crimes against Jews, who are, of course, the most predominantly targeted in hate crimes. And there's been a spike of hate crimes against Jewish people because of this conflict. because of how some people have reacted to this conflict. You know what the tankies and those kind of people are going to be saying about this kind of thing, how they are completely, what they have been saying, what they are going to continue to be saying, how they are completely in support of Hamas and all these different things. I want to be perfectly clear. I stand with Palestine. I do not stand with Hamas. When I first heard about this, and we're going to get into the videos here, I'm sorry for the preamble. It's been about a month. I got some catching up to do with you guys. There has been this conflation of that Hamas is Palestine. And to be clear, that is what the Israeli government wants. They essentially allowed Hamas to rise to power so they could use them as an enemy and be like, oh, yep, that's Palestine. And when you advocate on Hamas's behalf, you're advocating against Palestine. When I heard about the horrific news in the first place, I thought these idiots just signed a death warrant for Palestine. They aren't for Palestine because Hamas attacks Israel like this. Israel's going to retaliate, and they have. More news has come out of the fact that the airstrikes that we've seen on Hamas may not have actually been by Israel directly, but they are retaliating in general. Anyway, with all of this said, let's go ahead and get into this. I really hate this framing, and there's probably going to be a lot that we get into here, but I want to be clear, many people are trying to paint this as like Israel people good, Palestine bad, or Hamas good and Israel bad, etc. I'm sure there are plenty of good people actually in Israel, but the government of Israel, the people who are making the plays and are subjugating the Palestinian people to what they have been for, again, decades, are not good people, obviously. And once again, I do support and think that we should support Palestinian liberation, but not the terrorist organization of Hamas. So let's get into this.
On October 7, Palestinian militant group. On October 7, Palestinian militant group Hamas.
Wait, closed captions aren't available for this? What the hell? Why? Are they not available for any of these? No, they're available for this. Okay. What? Okay. All right.
Launched an attack on Israel. By land, by sea, and by air, it was the first time Hamas has directly invaded Israel. Some have described it as Israel's September 11 moment, the worst surprise attack in 50 years. Hamas attacked homes, civilians, a concert in Israel. More than 1,500 dead, thousands injured, and hundreds kidnapped. No one saw it coming, but at the same time, it was not exactly a surprise. The last time serious violence broke out was in 2021, but it was nothing like this. Israel has promised swift and furious retaliation, saying they will launch a, quote, complete siege on Gaza. The bombing has already begun.
Do you know anything about that? What can you report at this stage?
And a ground offensive could soon be launched. Urban warfare in one of the most densely populated places on Earth. As the situation unfolds, many want to know the context behind the war. The conflict between Israel and Palestine has raged on for generations. The fighting we have seen is over the same issues and hatred born of 100 years of struggle. So how did it start? Well, after the Ottoman Empire was defeated in World War I, Britain took control of the area known as Palestine, a strip of land between the River Jordan and the Mediterranean Sea. Back then, it was occupied by an Arab majority and a Jewish minority. The international community tasked Britain with setting up a, quote, national home for Jewish people in Palestine. But both Jews and Arabs claimed that historical Palestine was their land. You can see how that will become an issue. From the 20s to the 40s, many Jewish people fled to Palestine to escape persecution and the atrocities of the Holocaust, but that only incited the Arab
Okay, so far this is true.
population living there. Violence between the Jews, Arabs, and against the Brits escalated. So, in 1947, the United Nations voted for Palestine to be split into separate Jewish and Arab states. Jerusalem, a holy land for both, would become an international city. Jewish leaders embraced the plan, but the Arab leaders did not. So began a stalemate. In 1948, the Brits realized the problem couldn't be solved by them, so they left. And Jewish leaders declared the creation of the State of Israel, with the backing of then US President Harry Truman. This did not go down well with many Palestinians. A war broke out, with neighboring Arab countries, including Jordan and Egypt, joining the fight. The beginning of the Arab...
Okay, this is kind of true. America really pushed hard for Jewish people to be able to reclaim the Holy Land. And there's a reason for that. Basically, what it comes down to... Oh, get out of here. What it comes down to is... Oh my god, what the hell are these? Is this because of, like, ad blockers that I have? This is awful. Okay, anyway. Yes, at the heart of Christian Zionism is not a love for Israel, but rather Christian nationalism. You're welcome to read any articles you may want to on this kind of thing. I just wanted to pull up something that kind of visualized my point. But there's this idea in Christianity of the rapture. The rapture is, of course, where... Let me just see if I can... The rapture is this idea where okay, so there are multiple versions of the rapture. I grew up Catholic originally and was taught the version of the rapture where basically God will take all of the people that don't believe. He will take them and I guess give them one last chance, if I remember correctly, to accept him into their heart. And if not, he will damn them to hell. But the more popular version of leaving the believers to stay on earth and enjoy it as is. The other version of the rapture, the one that is more popular these days, is from Protestantism, which is essentially this idea that those souls you see here flying up, these are actually the saved. And the idea is that instead, it's the other way around, essentially. Now, there have been books on this, like Left Behind, which of course got turned into 2 movies, funnily enough. Yeah, there's a lot of different things on this, but let's be honest about what this is. It's Christian mythology, and it's doomsday prophecy, and regardless of what your beliefs, a lot of Christianity and the idea of the rapture and all of this stuff, it's a doomsday cult in many different ways. When it comes to this kind of stuff, this is doomsday cult shit. That's what it is. So when you have people supporting Israel, most of the time it is not actually people who want to support Jewish people. Most of the time it is, and it's not Jewish people themselves either, it is Christian fundamentalists who legitimately believe that in order to have the glorious rapture, the Holy Land, Israel, needs to be reclaimed and reconquered and everything by the Jews. That is legitimately what they believe. And they believe that once that happens, the end times can begin. That's why, when you look up this kind of thing, you will even see things like 5 reasons many Christians believe end times are upon us. Is Hamas in the Bible? No, Hamas isn't. Where was the part about are we in the end times? I saw something, an article that said are we in the end times? Maybe not. Okay. Yeah, but no, they legitimately believe. There are many people that legitimately believe and base actual political policy and support to political allies like Israel on the notion that if they are reformed, the end times will begin. That's, like, unironically, a lot of people legitimately believe this.
Israeli conflict. It was catastrophic for Palestinians. Hundreds of thousands fled. By the time fighting ended the following year, Israel controlled most of the land. Jordan, siding with the Palestinians, occupied land which became known as the West Bank, while Egypt occupied Gaza. Jerusalem was divided between Israeli forces in the west and Jordanian forces in the east. Crucially, there was never a peace agreement. Each side blamed the other. War would continue for decades. Fast forward to June 5, 1967, the beginning of the Six-Day War. Now, this is significant because the map was again redrawn. Israel captured and occupied the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and other Arab territories. The thing is, most Palestinian refugees and their descendants live in Gaza and the West Bank. Neither they nor their descendants have been allowed by Israel to return to their homes. Israel says this would overwhelm the country and threaten its existence as a Jewish state. Now, Israel still occupies the West Bank.
These fucking cowards. Okay, listen, I'm a big believer in this. If you see a video with comments turned off, I don't care how controversial it is. People that are audit, like, turning comments off on their own, they just don't want to hear criticism. That's really what it comes down to.
And even though it pulled out of Gaza, the UN still recognizes that land as occupied territory. Following? Okay, now let's look at Jerusalem. It's one of the holiest lands on earth for Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Israel claims the whole city as its capital, but Palestine claims East Jerusalem is the capital of its future state. For the past 50 years, Israel has built settlements in Jerusalem. More than 600,000 Jews now live there, but the Palestinians say that's illegal under international law. There have been numerous attempts at peace over the decades, starting in 1979 and culminating in the 90s in Oslo. Palestinian and Israeli leaders.
So this is one of the things that I want to be clear about. I don't think that people who are born from settlers and into settler communities are legitimate targets, for example. I don't think, because, again, very much against the sins of the father kind of mentality. If your ancestors, or your whatever it might be, came to have land that they took from other people, that does not mean that you yourself are responsible for that and that you necessarily need to leave or anything like that. However, people that are, because it is still happening to this day, people that are still moving in and kicking Palestinian people out, so to speak, are scum. They are absolute scum. It's kind of like the difference between America, or Canada even, for example. None of us that are currently living are personally responsible or should feel guilty or anything for the crimes that our country has committed and the horrible things we did to, say, like, indigenous people. And yes, we are on stolen land, 100%. But we weren't around to make those decisions. It's not our responsibility. It's not my responsibility. It's not your responsibility. However, if we were, and we went along with it, and we were like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. We'll just take their land, or what have you. Or we would support, like, taking the little bit of land that indigenous people actually still have. That would be horrific, right? You're not responsible. I don't believe you're responsible for yourself and your own actions. You're not responsible for the things your ancestors and stuff like that did, but you're responsible for yourself. So I just want to make that clear. But people that are like, oh, the settlers are just as bad, they need to, die or whatever. It's like, they're just people. Like, calm down. There are children settlers, babies, right? Like, I mean, they did not choose to be there. None of us choose to be anywhere where we are. So it's absolutely a delusional take.
Leaders met and negotiated a two-state solution. Initial promise and optimism gave way to anger and distrust, and by 2000, violence again erupted. By 2008, the prospects of peace had taken a severe hit. The most recent peace plan came from Donald Trump in January 2020. Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu said it was, quote, deal of the century, but the Palestinians scoffed at it, saying it was one-sided. So tensions remained incredibly high, particularly in East Jerusalem.
It was one-sided. Okay, here's the difference. Here's the thing. The ideas for peace. Israel wants to have complete control and for the Palestinians to just roll over and take it. The Palestinians want freedom and liberation. You know what the solution is here? Giving them that freedom and liberation. That's it. There is no like, well, what can Israel? Nothing. Israel doesn't get anything. The people that are currently there, that are in settler communities and stuff, again, I don't think they necessarily need forced out or killed or any crazy shit like that. But the Palestinians in general should not be subjugated to like limited access to drinking water and even bathing water and cleaning, like all that stuff, and electricity and the internet and all these different things. That is like what they are going through here. They're being like, it's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Jerusalem, Gaza, and the West Bank.
The solution is like leave and let them alone.
Since 2007,
But that's not what Israel wants to do.
Gaza has been ruled by a Palestinian militant group called Hamas, which has battled Israel countless times. Palestinians say they're suffering because of Israeli actions and restrictions. Israel says it's only acting to protect itself from Palestinian violence. It is endless. But things really kicked off in mid-April 2021, the start of the holy Muslim month of Ramadan. There were daily violent clashes between Israeli police and Palestinians, and scenes like this, forced eviction of Palestinian families in East Jerusalem, which inflamed the situation. In the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah, an Israeli man with a thick New York accent is filmed occupying the backyard of a Palestinian woman's home.
Jacob, you know this is not your house.
Yes, but if I go, you don't go back. So what's the problem? Why are you yelling at me? I didn't do this. I didn't do this.
But
It's easy to yell at me, but I didn't do this.
you are stealing my house.
And if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it.
No one.
I don't like that. I don't like that mentality. If I don't steal it, someone else is going to. No, it could just be that no one steals it. How about that?
It's allowed to steal it, Yammi.
And then this. Israel unleashed devastating airstrikes on Gaza, while Hamas countered with hundreds of rockets fired back at Israel, as has so often.
Right, so we briefly talked about that part, how it could be that some of those reports were not entirely accurate about Israel actually doing that for their retaliation. But one thing I want to make clear as well is that you'll have people on both sides of this conflict, if you will, as far as advocators, saying things like, oh, well, Palestine's actually in total support. And you'll have that as like, tankies who will be like, oh yeah, well, they're actually in total support. They're great. But you'll also have Israeli people who will do that, and they'll be like, oh yeah, they're in total support. They're evil. They're the enemy. Like all that shit. And the reality is, organizations like Hamas, like Al Qaeda, like ISIS, all of these terrorist organizations are created by the means that are set before them, within the conditions that they reside in. The reason that there are people who are able to be recruited into these organizations is because countries, big powerful ones like ours, or like Israel, or like any of these countries, subjugate the people to horrific living situations to the point where they have no hope for a better tomorrow outside of picking up a gun and dying for their country. They have nothing. So when they're in these horrible conditions, what the fuck do you expect them to do? Now, that is not to say that the terrorist organizations in general, or these specific ones even, are in the right. They absolutely are not. But that is to say that people join these organizations and they exist for a reason, and that reason can and needs to ultimately be taken away by the same people in power that have brought it about in the first place.
Often been the case. Conflicting claims over Jerusalem is at the emotional core of this conflict. Egypt and other surrounding nations tried to broker peace, but as always, for peace to be agreed, both sides need to resolve complex, deep-seated issues. And until that happens, it's hard to see an end to this endless conflict.
Jesus. Some people will say that, like, oh, this is a complicated issue. This is da 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 da. No. the way to resolve it seems like it could be complicated. But morally, I don't believe it's complicated at all. Have you ever been in an argument with somebody and they wanted you to compromise with them, but that compromise was them just getting their way? Well, that's what Israel wants. Like, say you have a roommate and their compromise is, well, I know we agreed on this amount of the rent, but I'm actually not going to pay. I'm just not going to pay it. And the compromise is you have to pay for me. It's not a compromise. It's not a good. Okay. Imagine you're in your home and you have somebody who comes in and they're just like, it's a nice place. I'll take it. You're like, what? What? What do you mean you'll take it? I live here. Like, no. I live here now. Like, what? No, I live here. This is my home. Like, no. I live here now. And you get into a conflict. It's like, no, you don't. Like, listen. We can compromise here. You can leave. That's not a compromise. And what Israel wants, as representative as a nation, not necessarily every individual person, but representative as a nation and as a government, is to get rid of Palestinians. It is, again, horrific, the treatment that they are enacting upon Palestinians, but it is what they're doing. Here, let's check out this video. This Vox video does a pretty good job explaining the situation as well here. And this was 7 years ago. What am I looking for?
One of the biggest myths about the Israel-Palestine conflict is that it's been going on for centuries, all about ancient religious hatreds. In fact, while religion...
Oh my god, I really hate... I really hate that this just isn't the default. Why would we not? Why would you not want 100? Okay, whatever.
is involved, conflicts mostly about two groups of people who claim the same. One of the biggest myths about the Israel-Palestine conflict is that it's been going on for centuries, all about ancient religious hatreds. In fact, while religion is involved, conflicts mostly about two groups of people who claim the same land, and it really only goes back about a century to the early 1900s. Around then, the region along the eastern Mediterranean we now call Israel-Palestine, been under Ottoman rule for centuries. It was religiously diverse, including mostly Muslims and Christians, also a small number of Jews who lived generally in peace. It was changing in two important ways. First, more people in the region were developing a sense of being not just ethnic Arabs, but Palestinians, a distinct national identity. At the same time, not so far away in Europe, more Jews were joining a movement called Zionism, which said that Judaism was not just a religion, but a nationality, one that deserved a nation of its own. And after centuries of persecution, many believed a Jewish state was their only way of safety and saw their historic homeland in the Middle East as their best hope for establishing it. In the first decade of the 20th century, tens of thousands of European Jews moved there. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and British and French empires carved up the Middle East, the British taking control of a region it called the British...
So a lot of this is similar to what the other video was explaining. I just want to go through this one too because it's more honest.
Mandate for Palestine. First, the British allowed Jewish immigration. But as more Jews arrived, settling in farming communities, tension between Jews and Arabs grew. Both sides committed acts of violence, and by the 1930s, the British began limiting Jewish immigration. In response, Jewish militias formed to fight both the local Arabs and to resist British rule. Then came the Holocaust, leading many more Jews to flee Europe for British Palestine and galvanizing much of the world in support of a Jewish state. In 1947, as sectarian violence between Jews and Arabs there grew, the United Nations approved a plan to divide British Palestine into two separate states. One for Jews, Israel, and one for Arabs, Palestine. The city of Jerusalem, where Jews, Muslims, and Christians all have holy sites, was to become a special international zone. The plan was meant to give Jews a state, to establish Palestinian independence, and to end the sectarian violence that the British could no longer control. But the Jews accepted the plan, and they declared independence as Israel. But Arabs throughout the region saw the UN plan as just more European colonialism trying to steal their land. Many of the Arab states, who had just recently won independence themselves...
By the way, just to be clear about this, tankies especially, but people in general will do this with China and Thailand as well, where they'll say like, oh, it's what do they call it? Like one nation, two states or something. Where basically similar to what Israel's doing to Palestine. China constantly fucks over Thailand, and yet there are people who are like, oh no, it's perfectly fine. It's okay. They can do that. It's all right. It's okay for them to do that. It's like no, it's not. And these kind of things happen, and obviously like that can lead to horrible conflict, like what we're seeing as well. But I'm not too well versed with the Thailand situation. I will say Thailand and China. I know a little bit about it. That's about what I know. But the point is, like, the parallels are here. It's horrific when and that solution doesn't work. Is my point. Sorry, that's where I was going with that.
Declared war on Israel in an effort to establish a unified Arab Palestine where all of British Palestine had been. The new state of Israel won the war, but in the process, they pushed well past their borders under the UN plan, taking the western half of Jerusalem and much of the land that was to have been part of Palestine. They also expelled huge numbers of Palestinians from their homes, creating a massive refugee population whose descendants today number about 7 million. At the end of the war, Israel controlled all of the territory except for Gaza, which Egypt controlled, and the West Bank, named because it's west of the Jordan River, which Jordan controlled. This was the beginning of the decades-long Arab-Israeli conflict. During this period, many Jews in Arab-majority countries fled or were expelled, arriving in Israel. Then something happened that transformed the conflict. In 1967, Israel and the neighboring Arab states fought another war. When it ended, Israel had seized the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank from Jordan, and both Gaza and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. Israel was now occupying the Palestinian territories, including all of Jerusalem and its holy sites. This left Israel responsible for governing the Palestinians, a people that had fought for decades. In 1978, Israel and Egypt signed the US-brokered Camp David Accords. Shortly after that, Israel gave Sinai back to Egypt as part of the peace treaty. At the time, this was hugely controversial in the Arab world. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat was assassinated in part because of outrage against it. But it marked the beginning of the end of the wider Arab-Israeli conflict. Over the next few decades, the other Arab states gradually made peace with Israel, even if they never signed formal peace treaties. But Israel's military was still occupying the Palestinian territories of the West Bank and Gaza, and this is when the conflict became an Israeli-Palestinian struggle. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, which had formed in the 1960s to seek a Palestinian state, fought against Israel, including through acts of terrorism. Initially, the PLO claimed all of what had been British Palestine, meaning it wanted to end the state of Israel entirely. Fighting between Israel and the PLO went on for years, even including...
And again, I want to be clear, a lot of these organizations do specifically advocate for the eradication of Jewish people, just like the Israeli government wants to have the eradication of Palestinians. These terrorist organizations, like Hamas, want to do the eradication of Jewish people. So that's bad. I want to make sure we're on the same page with that.
In 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon to kick the group out of
stillness of the ceasefire in southern Lebanon was shattered today by the sound of guns, bombs, and planes.
The PLO later said it would accept dividing the land between Israel and Palestine, but the conflict continued. As all of this was happening, something dramatic was changing in the Israel-occupied Palestinian territories. Israelis were moving in. These people are called settlers, and they made their homes in the West Bank and Gaza, but the Palestinians wanted them or not. Some moved for religious reasons, some because they want to claim the land for Israel, some just because housing is cheap, often subsidized by the Israeli government. Some settlements are cities with thousands of people, others are small communities deep into the West Bank.
If you've always felt a deep yearning for Jerusalem, now is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, not only to stand within its gates, but also to build the home of your dreams there.
Settlers are followed by soldiers to guard them, and the growing settlements force Palestinians off of their land and divide communities. Short term, they make the occupation much more painful for Palestinians. Long term, by dividing up Palestinian land, they make it much more difficult for the Palestinians to ever have an independent state. Today, there are several 100,000 settlers in occupied territory, even though the international community considers them illegal. By the late 1980s, Palestinian...
Yeah, that's one of the important things, too. Even the national community considers them illegal. There are the human rights organizations have looked at the ways that Palestinians are treated and such, and they have deemed that what Israel is doing to them is illegal. They are violating international law. They're 100% violating things like the Geneva Convention. They are violating so much shit, and yet countries like ours just let them go. Just let them get away with it, because so much political support in both parties, in America, for example, hinge upon support of Israel. Because again, it comes back to the whole end times prophecy and all that shit. It's insane. We're getting better about it as a nation. There are less people who are supporting Israel specifically now, obviously on the left, but even on the right a little bit. Now, you have to think there are an amount of people on the right who also probably think that America is legitimately controlled by, Jewish people, so Israel. So, there is that aspect to it as well. But all in all, it is good that we are letting up, I'll say, on our militant support of Israel.
frustration exploded into the Intifada, which is the Arabic word for uprising. It began with mostly protests and boycotts, but soon became violent. Israel responded with heavy force.
Yeah, and 100%. I also, of course, completely advocate for peaceful protests and things of that nature, which, by the way, Israel has now began arresting people for that are like anti-war, that are protesting in Israel. They have been arresting people for this for dissent. It's insane. It's insane. They're going after people's like social media accounts and all kind of different things if they're Israeli citizens. It's I mean it's yeah, it's not really that democratic.
A couple hundred Israelis, over 1,000 Palestinians died in the First Intifada. Around the same time, a group of Palestinians in Gaza who considered the PLO too secular, too compromise-minded, created Hamas, a violent extremist group dedicated to Israel's destruction.
So this is one of the things I want to be really clear about with Hamas specifically, and with any of these like jihadist groups. These people literally are dying for their country because they don't care. They think that they are going to go to whatever their version of heaven or the afterlife is. I know there was that thing before in 9/11 or after in the 2000s, which kind of got turned into a bit of a racist joke about the whole 90 virgins or 900 virgins, I think it was. I don't think that's the big thing anymore. I think it's just like the idea that they're going to go to heaven for, But I want to be clear about this. This is not like just a Islamic thing. When the Crusades were fought, and Christians fought in the Crusades against Islamic people to reclaim the Holy Land, they were also told, if you die in war, you'll die a hero and you'll go to heaven. Your sins will be forgiven and you'll go to heaven. So like this theocratic, insane like way of thinking is nothing new. And it's not just like, oh, that's just how Muslims are. No, that's fucking racist and bullshit. That's how a lot of like powerful organized religions are. It's sad, but like, yeah, that's how it tends to go.
By the early 1990s, it's clear that Israelis and Palestinians have to make peace. The leaders from both sides signed the Oslo Accords. This is meant to be the big first step toward Israel maybe someday withdrawing from the Palestinian territories and allowing an independent Palestine. The Oslo Accords established the Palestinian Authority, allowing Palestinians a little bit of freedom to govern themselves in certain areas.
Just a little bit, not too much, not enough to actually, do anything, but just a little bit.
Hardliners on both sides opposed the Oslo Accords. Members of Hamas launched suicide bombings to try to sabotage the process. The Israeli right protests peace talks with ralliers calling Prime Minister...
Yeah, anybody that is where a common tactic is suicide bombings, or like in World War II, Japan had kamikazes, that is clearly not the right side. You know what I mean? Like that'd be pretty fucked up. Like, I understand, of course, you don't have to be, but it's good generally to like be willing to die for your country and your cause. But that's a bit much, don't you think?
Mr. Yitzhak Rabin, a traitor and a Nazi. Not long after Rabin signs the second round of Oslo Accords, a far-right Israeli shoots him to death in Tel Aviv. But this violence showed how extremists on both sides can use violence to derail peace, keep a permanent conflict going as they seek the other side's total destruction. That's a dynamic that's been around ever since. Negotiations meant to hammer out the final details on peace drag on for years, and a big Camp David summit in 2000 comes up empty. Palestinians come to believe peace isn't coming, rise up in a second intifada, this one much more violent than the first. By the time it wound down a few years later, About 1,000 Israelis and 3,200 Palestinians had died. The Second Intifada really changes the conflict. Israelis become much more skeptical that Palestinians will ever accept peace or that it's even worth trying. Israeli politics shift right. The country builds walls and checkpoints to control Palestinians' movements.
By the way, just to be clear, there are people in Israel who are very against the current Israeli government. You can imagine, they get silenced in different ways, but they exist. There have been protests against the more recent Israeli leaders and such.
They're not really trying to solve the conflict anymore, just manage it. The Palestinians are left feeling like negotiating didn't work, and violence didn't work, and that they're stuck under an ever-growing occupation with no future as a people. That year, Israel withdraws from Gaza. Hamas gains power, but splits from the Palestinian Authority and
the approval rating for Hamas, by the way, is not that great, by the way. Like, in Palestine.
Its civil war, dividing Gaza from the West Bank. Israel puts Gaza under a suffocating blockade, and unemployment rises to 40%. This is the state of the conflict as we know it today. It's relatively new, and it's unbearable for Palestinians. In the West Bank, more and more settlements are smothering Palestinians, often respond with protests and some...
I mean, look at this. I can only imagine it's gotten worse. Here, let me turn the caption off. Look at this shit. All that green is where the Palestinians are, and then... So, like, they have this thing, for example, where they can't leave the country. Jewish people can come in and out of the country, but they can't leave the country. It's Iron Curtain shit. Like, it's insane. It's absolutely... Yeah, it's absolutely insane.
Sometimes with violence, though most just want normal lives. In Gaza, Hamas and other violent groups have periodic wars with Israel. The fighting overwhelmingly kills Palestinians, including lots of civilians. In Israel itself, most people have become apathetic. For the most part, the occupation keeps the conflict relatively removed from their daily lives, with moments of brief but horrible violence. There's little political will for peace.
I believe that a lot. Yeah. Yeah, I mean... Yeah, they just... Yeah. And of course, we see how it's escalated since then.
The state of Israel is the thorn in the Arab side. Today, it is a place of conflict between Arab and Jew.
Imagine waking up to a wall with the sun.
What in the hell is with these goddamn captions? Wait. Auto-train... No. Setting for all videos. Wait. Okay. What? Always show... I mean, I just... Oh, fuck you. Alright, fine, whatever. Wait. Oh, shit. Okay. Dude, this is ridiculous. Oh, now you'll do...
The state of Israel is the thorn in the Arab side. Today, it is a place of conflict between Arab and Jew.
Imagine waking up to a wall where the sound of children playing is replaced by the roar of rockets. This is the reality of many in Israel and Palestine today. Overnight, an unforeseen invasion occurred. Hamas fighters stormed Israeli towns, launching thousands of rockets. The result? Hundreds dead on both sides. But what exactly happened and how did we get here? The conflict between Israel and Palestine is over a century old, rooted in territorial and religious disputes. To understand the complexities of this conflict, we first need to delve into some key players and regions involved. Enter Hamas. Hamas, which basically means zeal in Arabic, is a Palestinian political and militant group. It was founded by Sheikh Ahmed Yassin to fight and break away from Israel. They first came into prominence in 1987 when Palestine revolted against the state of Israel. This group sees themselves as defenders of Palestinian rights against Israeli occupation. Now,
by the way, the reason I'm letting these recaps play each time is because I think it's important to see, just where the way that somebody retells this story and all that, I think is very indicative to, where they are, like how they feel about the conflict, what they're going to, where they stand, all that stuff. So I think it's good. I think it's important.
Video by Wall Street Journal, the attack on Israel began when the same Hamas militants launched multiple rockets on Israel. These militants infiltrated Israel near the Kerem Shalom crossing, an important checkpoint between Israel and Gaza. They broke the border fence and attacked the Israeli military base there, and by late morning, these militants began destroying sections of the border barriers, allowing more of them to infiltrate. By 7:30 a.m., the Hamas militants were spotted in Israeli towns and cities. Multiple Israeli civilians were taken as life hostages, and many more were killed. As of today, 2,300 people have been injured, and more than 700 people have lost their lives. This is what's happening, and it's absolutely heart-wrenching. To explain the whole conflict, I want to take you back in time to understand the roots of this conflict. Let's go back to early 20th century. This is when Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. At that time, seeing the rising anti-Semitism in Europe, a small segment of Jewish people started settling in this Ottoman Empire. Then during World War I, entered everyone's favorite empire, the British Empire. Now these British wanted to defeat the Ottoman Empire, so to gather support, they made a deal with both the Arabs and Jews in this region to help. This was the very beginning of
also seeing a consistent narrative throughout different sources covering the historical events is good too, because that helps you kind of see what is actually true. If everyone was saying different things and of how stuff happened, it's like, well then, wait, like who's lying here? So,
of the Palestinian conflict that we see today. These Britishers knew,
or as this video says, who's at fault?
What both parties wanted, so they promised the Arabs independence and the Jewish people a separate country, because there was a rising belief among Jews that they should have their separate land in Palestine, and this movement was called Zionism. So after the British overthrew the Ottoman Empire, in order to fulfill their deal, they decided to carve out some land in Palestine and give it to the Jews, who were a growing population as more Jews had fled Europe during and after the World War II. Now, this didn't go down very well with the Arabs, and they resisted this. This turned things extremely violent. The British were unable to control the violence, and in 1947, after 30 years of controlling Palestine, they washed their hands of the country in the hands of United Nations. To control the situation, United Nations proposed partition of the land and assigned over 55% of the land to Jews, which angered the Arabs even more. The situation escalated, and finally violence broke out between the two sets of people again, and this was the very first Arab-Israeli war of 1948. So what was the result of this war? The Jews, or the Palestinian Jews, who declared themselves as a state of Israel, controlled not only the area proposed by United Nations, but also gained almost 60% of the area proposed for the Arab state. Several massacres by the Israeli forces took place in 1948, which forced 250,000 Arabs to leave the country. Now, Israel had captured most of the land except Gaza, which came under Egypt's control, and the West Bank, which came under Jordan's control. Since then, there were more and more attempts to partition the land, but nothing concrete materialized except more violence. Until 1967, after a 6-day war, Israel finally captured the West Bank, Gaza, and Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. But they returned it back in 1978 under a peace treaty brokered by the US called the Camp David Accord. Now,
something that you have to understand with this whole conflict as well is that the people of Israel are very much indoctrinated into this idea that the Palestinian people are the enemy. One of the things that they have is when you become 18, I might be getting the age wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's when you become 18, you have to register for and perform at least 2 years in the Israeli military. Everybody has done this. Like, if you see a celebrity from Israel, like say Gal Gadot, she had served in that military. Everybody who is from Israel who didn't leave Israel until they were an adult served in the military for at least 2 years. Everybody does. And you have to think about that level of, if the military is against Palestine and the government is against Palestine and everybody is being taught and brought up where they have to be in the service and all this different stuff, you have to think about like what that does to the mentality of people who would otherwise be against what their government is doing. Now, for many people, obviously seeing the horrors of what is actually happening, it wakes them up and they're, oh shit, what we're doing to these people is terrible. But many others, especially I would imagine those who don't really get to see much action, or they do and they have to justify it, whatever the case, kind of like America did during like the Vietnam War and stuff like that, will be against everything because they saw what actually happened.
10 years had passed after the peace treaty in 1987 when violent protests broke out again with Palestinian Arabs revolting against Israel's military occupation of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. This was known as Intifada, a turning point in the story between Israel and Palestine because it led to the formation of the extremist militant group which we spoke about earlier, the Hamas, which is currently attacking Israel. In 2000s, the second Intifada erupted which pushed Israel to leave Gaza. By 2007,
Was this a recent video? Yes, it was. Okay.
Hamas had captured Gaza after they fight with another extremist group, the Fatah, which went on to control the West Bank. Which brings us to today. What triggered Hamas to invade Israel and where did things go horribly wrong? It's too early to provide fixed reasons, but this is what has been reported as of today. Israel established a blockade in Gaza after Hamas captured it, and according to the human rights group, it's described as an open air prison which has left 45%.
You know, I should make sure, by the way, is this a Palestinian, like, I'm sorry if this sounds like, you know, racist or ignorant, but I actually don't know if these people, she sounds Indian. I think that the people are Indian. I don't know how, I'm pretty sure India is like against Israel in this, I think. I'm sorry, let me check this out real quick. I don't want to be, you know, saying incorrect shit here. What's it called? Okay. India's support of Israel marks a departure from its cautious diplomatic policy toward the Middle East. Okay. Okay. Let's see what she says.
Of the population there unemployed. The condition is similar in the West Bank, where Israel has established a separate.
I don't know. I mean, look, maybe India as a nation does, but this channel and this woman doesn't. That would be good because she sounds pretty condemning of Israel so far, which is good. Honest, at least.
Wall cutting off thousands of Palestinians from social services, schools, and farmlands. Now,
yeah, I'm telling you, unironically, Iron Curtain shit.
Over the last few years, tensions between the Israeli settlers in these areas and the Palestinians have been growing. And this tension erupted after the Al-Aqsa Mosque incident recently. So Al-Aqsa Mosque is considered the holiest place in both Judaism and Islam. According to Seattle Times, in the past few years, Jews were prevented.
Oh yeah, apparently it was some like anniversary of some big event as well. I overlooked that because I don't remember the specifics, but there's a reason they did it on this date.
From
the date of October 7th.
Praying inside the compound to avoid any violent protest from the Palestinians. But last week, according to The Guardian, the Palestinian Jews prayed inside the mosque compound, which triggered the Palestinian Arabs. Now, the exact motivation behind this attack is not clear, but according to Hamas spokesperson Khaled Kadomi, this became the trigger point and led them to launch a coordinated attack on Israel. Now, while the Hamas are claiming this as a reason to protect their holy shrine, several innocent civilians are getting brutally killed both in Palestine and in Israel. During war, it is very easy to point fingers, to label one side as right and the other as wrong. But the stark reality is there are no true winners in wars. Economies crumble, children lose their lives, and entire nations bear the scars of conflict. Online on Twitter, you'll see people voicing their support for Palestine, while others staunchly support Israel. But what they're essentially forgetting is that millions are suffering. Our heart goes out to everybody going through this conflict. Our job is to come here and educate you all on the implications and horrors of what's happening so you can be smart and make your own opinions and decisions. Wars are extremely complex in nature, but we've tried to explain the gist of what's happening through this video. That is all for today. My name is Achina Maya. Thank you for watching.
I agree with that for the most part, but I think it's pretty clear who's in the wrong. I mean, she's right that people are pointing sides, and again, anybody that says that they're supporting Israel, or sorry, supporting Palestine when they're really just supporting Hamas, and like, oh, Hamas is fine with it. No, that's horrible. But it's I don't think it's morally complicated. There was this thing I saw recently as well. Mel Brooks summed it up perfectly.
That's the big thing. Super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship, period.
Here, we don't have subtitles or anything here. I mean, we didn't for that other video, but we didn't really need them. We're just going to put this at normal. Here, let's try.
Not a complex issue. That's the big thing. It's super simple. There's one group that has enormous power. It's the most powerful country in the Middle East. It's backed by the United States. It acts on another population of people with total impunity and is never held accountable for anything. So there's no symmetry in the relationship, period. And just as like a thought experiment, IDW people, if we know that if somehow a population of Jewish refugees ended up in West Bank and Gaza, and an Arabic government in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv had an open-air prison in Jewish Gaza, which they bombed with white phosphorus, they killed civilians indiscriminately, and they had no provisions for medicine. They had an embargo that blocked food, that electricity wasn't running, that there was an over 48% unemployment rate, life expectancy and malnutrition statistics were horrifying. One of the major policymakers in this hypothetical Arabic-Palestinian state said, we need to put those Jews on a diet. In the West Bank, there was another Jewish area where there was a little bit more autonomy, but there was regular Arabic settlements where they pulled up the Jewish farmers' foods, they terrorized them with rocks, the security forces broke children's bones, and they couldn't drive their own roads. We'd all have no problem understanding what that was. So there's nothing complex about it. The second part of your question, it's a pure asymmetry relationship. And the question is rights or not. So that's it. It's not complicated.
Yeah. No, 100%. This is why Israel is in the wrong. If we can look at and see that, again, things like the Iron Curtain was wrong, why can't we look at this and say that what Israel is doing is wrong, but at the same time, what Hamas has been doing is also wrong? Two things can be true at the same time. You can support Israel and advocate for their freedom and their autonomy and all that good stuff while condemning the horrific acts that Hamas has taken. They haven't, because it's not like they're an organization that has strategically attacked military targets or anything like that. They've been attacking innocent people. Like, all that's going to do is piss off Israel, and that's all it did. Hamas is not for Palestine. Hamas is for themselves. Tankies are not for Palestine. Tankies are for, using Hamas and like terrorism as a virtue signal of some sort. And speaking of virtue signaling, there are many people on the other side that are obviously virtue signaling for Israel. But many people don't actually care about the people involved in this conflict. They just want to be on the side that they stand on, and that's it. But these are human beings with lives of their own that have been stripped away for many different reasons by a country much more powerful than them that our country supports. And a large reason that a lot of people in this country, the most powerful country in the world, supports is because of a fucking fairy tale. And a belief that once all the Jews are back in Israel, which they already were, well, not every Jewish, but you get what I mean. Once they reclaim the Holy Land, the rapture is going to start. Great. So we have fucking death cultists propagating misery and absolute horrific treatment against people who don't deserve it because they think it's going to make Sky Daddy take them to paradise. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. It's a very heated issue. There are people who have many thoughts, many concerns, etc. But I want to end with this. I do not think that essentialism in any way is ever right. If you know, Jewish people, for example, as I do, and many people do, it is not their fault, and it is not your right to take anything out on them. Same thing with Islamic or any people who might be from that region. Well, they can't be from that region currently because they can't leave the country, because that's part of the problem, but you know what I mean. I believe the solution ultimately is for Israel to just leave them alone. I think that a lot of the people who are currently living there should potentially stay, but a pretty easy thing that Israel can start with: taking them down the walls and the checkpoints and all the crazy shit that they're doing. Start there. Give them access to clean drinking water, internet, electricity. I'm not even saying kick out all the settlers. I don't think that's necessarily fair either. But give these people access to basic human necessities and amenities. It's absolutely horrific. And people that are using this to virtue signal one way or the other is equally disgusting. I really hope that we see a peaceful end to this conflict, but the only way we're going to see that is for Israel to stop doing the crazy dictator fucking oppressive shit that they've been doing. There's a clear oppressor here and a clear answer. And while it is true that when you push people down so much, they will fight back, it is also true that the way that certain groups are fighting back is not right. And in war, innocent people feel the brunt of it as well. So, I stand with Palestine. I stand against Hamas. And I don't know if I'd say I stand against Israel, not the Israeli people. But, yeah, the Israeli government, they really need to fuck off in Palestine. I don't think it's hard to come to this conclusion or understanding. But I don't think anybody, especially that don't even live in those countries, should be essentialized one way or the other. And I think that when we have conversations about geopolitical issues like this, we need to be understanding of where people are coming from. Meet them where they are, listen to them, hear them out, and be open-minded and open-hearted. Don't fall for bullshit, but don't demonize people like that either. Anyway, as always, I've gone on long enough, so these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Follow me on social media for more, links in the description. Subscribe, ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like, and if not, I hope you find something to do like. Take care of each other out there, guys. Peace and love.